Oh my God, guys. I cannot believe it. I have Chad, the man himself, on the podcast. He just launched Graymalkin Lane, the podcast, which I have been binging on these last few weeks. I am so obsessed with him. Hi, Chad.
Hi, Dayspring. How are you?
It's so weird. This is the first time we've actually met.
Yeah, we've chatted a bit, but it's really nice to connect in person. Your enthusiasm is infectious.
Oh my God. I feel like when we first started talking, I was down in Miami for a gig and I was at the Mr. C, completely being drunk, trying to live my best Christian Frost life, drinking like an obscene amount of Vouv. And then we were talking and I forgot what we were saying. And then my husband came to the pool area and was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, your Dio died. And then I had to go rush home, and I know we kind of like fell off talking for a little bit. So I always regret that I never got a chance to really, run wild with our conversation.
Yeah, no, I'm always happy to connect, and yeah, life takes over pretty regularly for all of us, I think. So yeah, I'm glad we're here today.
So you started a podcast. You told me before you were starting the podcast that you were thinking of starting the podcast.
I've listened to yours quite a bit, and so yeah, I reached out to kind of connect regarding that because it was kind of a whole new niche for me.
What made you want to start a podcast?
I have a tremendous amount of creative energy, and I am a much happier person when I am channeling it somewhere. And during that 18 months of COVID crazy, all of that creative energy just got locked up tight. So I needed a post-COVID world project to work on. And came up with the idea for the podcast and went with it. And it's been so much fun.
Well, I remember that trip when I was down in Florida. You had just posted your trailer. And I was like, okay, I'll listen to this. And your voice in that first trailer, you sounded so good. And like your background music and everything. And you were just explaining the podcast. Was it like a 5-minute trailer? I don't remember how long it was.
Yeah, like 6 or 7 minutes, I think.
But it was so good.
My partner does sound editing and music, so he did all of that, and so I'm blessed to have that here in my home. So he's able to do that. But yeah, I think I have a good radio voice. What's the old joke? I have a face for radio.
I say that to so many people. I try to put a spin on it and be like, you have a voice for radio. but your voice is great.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yours as well. I really enjoy listening to the work you're doing. You have so much enthusiasm and charisma in every interview that you do. It's really impressive. It's really infectious as a listener tuning in. It makes me excited to like learn new things.
That's beyond kind because, I think much like you with the pandemic, there so much just happened. Life happened. And I thought I was going to go nuts. And so I needed to lean into something. And comics and X-Men was something I always sort of denied because I kind of moved here to New York City. I didn't have much space. And then, I just started doing things. And I always kept all my comic book stuff tucked away. But then when the pandemic again happened, I needed to lean into things that made me happy.
Yeah, it was almost the opposite for me. I'm always really good at channeling my creative energy, but during the pandemic, I got 3 times busier than normal. A lot of people had time on their hands, but I went insane. I started working from home. I work as a therapist, and therapists were in very high demand through the pandemic. So I was working double hours, and I have 2 kids who were being homeschooled. So it went to
survive. I'm sorry for cutting you off.
Stretched thin. It was a long 18 months. But we all came out stronger. We're good.
So your professional life is the busiest it's ever been. You have 2 kids who need to be homeschooled. So you were like, why don't I just start a podcast as well?
Well, I started the podcast after the work hours diminished and after the kids went back to school. I did it when I had more free time, knowing I needed that outlet again. And I'm having fun, which is a really good sign. If you're having a good time along the way, I think that's the key to whether you should continue something or not.
So when did you first start loving comic books? When did Chad the kid come to comic books?
When I was in 6th grade, my home life was pretty shitty. And we lived in a small town, and I would go down to the grocery store and plunk out a couple of bucks for some comics off of the rack at the grocery store spinner rack. So I was like 12, which is 30 years ago. I'm 42 now. And I started reading Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Mutanimals comics from like the Archie line. And a few months later, those were canceled. And I was kind of devastated because it'd become like a huge escape for me when I was a kid. So I started like carefully thinking, all right, I want a new book to buy or a new series to dedicate myself to. So I after thinking about it for a long time, I picked up X-Force number 27. They're fighting Rainfire and the Mutant Liberation Force, and some of the characters turn good and some turn evil, and I was fascinated by this new world. So I started buying more books and then back issues, and then I got a job at a comic book store, and I would spend all of my money on comics. So it turned into like big stacks of thousands of books. So I've been reading for a long time now. I've probably read every book Marvel's put out at least once, and I've been a huge nerd for decades at this point.
What was the name of that comic book store you worked at?
It was in Idaho Falls, Idaho. It was called Captain Comics. I do not believe it exists any longer, but I haven't been there in a long time, so I couldn't say.
What was one of the things that surprised you working at a comic book store, from going from being a fan to working as a retailer?
So we're talking back in the mid 90s when I was there. And I was like still a high school student. So I was there a couple years. I think I was surprised by the obsession with other things outside of comics. Mm-hmm. So this is, like early internet era. People couldn't get, pirated stuff as easily. So people were obsessed with Pogs and Magic the Gathering and like the Star Trek trading card game. Like, so you'd see people with like huge passions about all these other things. I think probably the thing that surprised me most is you'd see people come in and they'd try to take like an original comic that was worth like $75, and they'd like peel the price tag off and then put like a $1 sticker on it and like try to buy it for $1. And we'd catch them every time. But I think I was surprised at how often that happened back then.
I didn't even think that. I there were no comic books stores in Miami. I don't want to say it like that. I always say that, but there were comic book stores that just weren't very local to where I was at. So I missed out on that kind of culture where people did shady things like that.
I love me a good comic book store. This one was really tiny, but I know even now there's like lots of gaming culture in comic shops, and I think that's a great place.
So what was your first memory of the X-Men? You started off with the Turtles, but when did you come to X-Men?
So my first comic was an X-Force, and then like trying to learn the history of these characters that had been around for decades. I remember picking up the books. It was the X-Men Blue and Gold era.
Oh yeah.
Excalibur was running, X-Factor was running, and like it felt really overwhelming to try to figure out which characters belonged where. But I kind of started obsessing over it. I remember making like lists in high school of like all of the characters and then like casting all of my friends in different roles based on personality traits. Like I got super nerdy with it right away. I've been an X-Men fan for a really long time. Favorite characters constantly shifting based on what I'm reading at the time. I think if I had to choose an all-time favorite, going back even to my childhood, it's probably Cannonball.
Oh, I love Cannonball.
I had a huge crush on him all through high school.
Oh, with the Ryder Strong hair. Yes. Oh, yeah. With his blue, costume. And when he fights Gladiator. I love that era of him. My screen name, I was on AOL keyword Marvel. And, I would go on the Toy Biz message boards there. And my screen name was Canon B 104. Not only after my printer, but also because of Cannonball. I
remember going into my high school and like looking up characters that I wanted to learn more about, like Moonstar or Warlock, and I would like go to whatever Wikipedia was back then, I don't even remember, and like print out their whole character history so that I could read it later. And when the teacher caught me, they got really mad because I was like printing hundreds of pages on the comic book.
There was no Wikipedia. It was probably like a ring group that you went to. Like,
yeah, I'm sure it was some fan site.
The way I used to have to do it, we didn't even have a printer in my house until later on, but I would have to go on AOL, do the dial-up, hit file fax, and then fax the character bios to my parents' office. let it print out on that fax paper, and then they bring it back to me the next day. You know?
Yeah, and I mean, comic fandom has changed nowadays because everybody has access to everything at their fingertips, so they can look at the whole history across the board.
I had this. This is what I had.
I remember that book.
Yeah, like this is the only, like this is probably the first time when this published in like 2004 that I actually read a very detailed biography on Rachel Summers or Magma or other characters like that. Because like back in the day, I mean, like you were saying, you just went to a comic book store and you hoped you found your issue, or you were in the middle of an issue, or they were sold out of a crossover issue. And so you kind of had to like piece everything together.
And then, you know, and then I started getting into the other stuff. Kurt Busiek's Avengers #1 back in '97, and Mark Waid's run on Captain America. And I mean, I could go on and on. Joe Kelly's run on Deadpool, like all those stuff from the late '90s that I loved. And the universe got so big, you know, it's a really interactive space.
Do you have a particularly favorite era?
You know, I think I tend to always answer from where I'm at now. My favorite run in recent years has been, well, up until my favorite book right now is Hellions. But prior to that, The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl has been my favorite thing in the last decade of books.
I've not read it.
Oh, it's so great.
Oh, okay. Well, I think we're going to have to do a special mini-sode where we talk about it, because I would love to.
I adore it. Each issue is like really dense, and I laugh out loud like 20 times. It's Ryan North did an amazing job with that series. It was so fun.
It's such a fun character, and I know she gets a lot of bad rap on the message boards, but you know, she's fun. I wanted to buy that Marvel Legends of her, the writer Legends. Do you have it by any chance?
I have a Squirrel Girl statue upstairs in my room. I'm not sure if it's the same one you're talking about.
Yeah.
I'll send you a photo of it later.
Yes, I want to see it. Okay, so you've always been a reader, so you never jumped off. A lot of people seem to have jumped off after Operation Zero Tolerance, but then kind of came back during Morrison's era. Did you ever jump off the books ever?
No, I mean, there's been times I've enjoyed them more than others, but I've consistently read basically everything Marvel puts out since I was a teenager. For a while when I was in college, I was writing some fan fiction online, you know, as we do when we are young and have time on our hands.
Stop it. I love that you were a fan fiction writer.
And I ended up getting connected with a team of other kind of fanfic writers and historians. And for a while there, I even worked on the Marvel handbooks line. So I was one of the writers and researchers in the official Marvel handbooks.
Oh no!
Which was a ton of work for very little payoff, except for the like seeing my name in a comic book. And I'd get checks in the mail with Spider-Man on them, which was amazing.
Did you keep any of them?
I think I have a couple in a file. In the X-Men 2008 Messiah Complex handbook,
yeah,
they have a profile of me in the back.
Oh, really?
So there's like a picture of me with like a little bio, and this is before I came out of the closet, so I sound like super closeted like religious back then, but it's still kind of a cool claim to fame to have.
No, that's incredible. I'm not ignoring you. I'm pulling out my Messiah Complex.
Oh, you have it like right there. I love that.
Let me see if I see that, because I know what you're talking about. I saw that. It's not.
It's in the final page of the handbook portion. So like the encyclopedia entries on the characters. Okay. But I'm not sure if it made it into the trade or not.
Yeah, I don't think I know which one you're talking about because I had it. I'm going to go through all of my back issues. Thank you for giving me what to do tonight. I'm going to ignore my husband.
It's saved online too. I can send you a copy.
I'm going to ignore my Pomeranian because I'm going to be looking for. You have a Pomeranian too, by the way.
I have a Pomsky. Yeah, he's a Pomeranian Husky, and he's ridiculous. He was just in here licking my face before we started.
Oh, I know. Apollo is bouncing always everywhere. You'll probably hear him scratching on the door to our study because he gets loose. Okay, so that's actually really, really cool. Like, so does Marvel outsource those guidebooks then, or they're not handled in-house? Or are you just hired as a freelancer?
It's kind of a freelancer work. So the editor, at least then, I'm not super in the know on what's happening now editorially. But the editor then was Jeff Youngquist, who kind of ran that side of the Marvel stuff, and he hired an editor named Jeff Christensen, who's a veterinarian in Florida. He runs a really incredible website called The Appendix of the Marvel Universe.
I've come across it before.
Yeah, and they do obscure characters. I do write-ups for them all the time just for fun. So my work with Jeff and the rest of the team, we'd report into Jeff Christensen, who would then report into Jeff Youngquist, and then the books would come out from there. But I got to do a couple of cool things too, like when Marvel launched their postage stamps campaign, they had like a press release as if it was written by Willie Lumpkin, the Fantastic Four's mailman. Yeah. And I got to write
Stanley in the movie.
Yeah, I got to write up all of the Willie Lumpkin's words for the public. Or they did a series that was like Captain America's Diary during Dark Reign, and I wrote a lot of that. So I got to do some really fun little.
Oh wow! So you have real like writing credits there.
Yeah, I mean it's awesome. Like very low on the totem pole, but yeah, it was really fun.
No, that's not low on the totem pole at all. That's awesome. You wrote Captain America's Diary. What did you say? Fun. Did you mention Stucky? Did Stucky get a mention in there?
I don't believe so. It was very character specific. So I'd have to be like, what would Captain America's thoughts on Ulysses Claw be, or on Cyclops, or on Emma Frost? And I'd have to delve into his history and write up these things. It was fun.
Spoilers for what he thinks about Emma. Oh my God. I remind Rogers of his mother.
That was a brilliant scene.
Who was his mother? Who was Captain America's mother? I want an answer to this.
So good. His mother was Sarah Rogers. She was a lovely person, although she had an abusive alcoholic husband.
Okay, but the fact that you knew that off the top of your head, and now I am
nerdy Marvel trivia constantly.
Sarah Rogers right now. Look, does she look like Emma Frost?
She does, yeah, in a way. She's much more conservative. Rick Remender did a run on Captain America a few years back where Cap gets trapped in Dimension Z.
I'm seeing it right now.
And there were tons of flashbacks to Cap's childhood in the 1920s. It was really great. So his mom was featured pretty prominently in that.
That deep cut there. Wow. Yeah, she does kind of look like Emma Frost. Thank you for solving this mystery for me.
And I'm always about my queer history as well. Captain America had a childhood friend named Arnie Roth who was gay.
Yep. And he died, right? Wasn't he?
He died. He was in the comics back in Grenwald's run, and I think he died in like Cap 300. I'd have to go back. It's been a minute since I've looked into that.
So when you're writing for Marvel, when you're doing the guidebooks, when you're doing Captain America's Diary, I mean, how do you feel like playing with these characters who have been like toys for all of us, but you get to officially, on some level, direct their story, or, you know, what's what I'm looking for here? Curate, you know, what's going on with them, you know, some of the back history with them. How did that make you feel back then?
It was a challenge in ways. So the assignment generally was they would have characters assigned to a specific handbook. I wasn't involved in the selection of those characters, but they would have, you know, a half page for certain characters, a full page for others, 2 or 3 or 4 pages for others. And then it was the job of the handbook writer to go read their entire history and write the summary. So some of the challenges were like when there's a character that's dead in one issue, but a few years later they're back in another, we'd have to like try to tie that in. But just the comprehensiveness of it, like if you read, I don't know, you take a character like the Blob, who doesn't seem that overwhelming, but he's appeared nearly 300 times. And so when you go back and you're digging into issues from Spider-Man and the Avengers and all these places where he's appeared, and you're trying to tie it all up and summarize with a word count, that became more of the challenge, trying to be really comprehensive. I remember writing the entry for Ulysses Claw. I brought him up twice today.
Okay, and someone's a stan.
I don't really like the character that actually, but he's in my brain today for some reason. But he has a really complex power set. So like trying to summarize that in a small entry. Yes.
We'll go ahead there. Yeah.
Beautiful stuff.
I mean, this is gorgeous. I mean, is one of your pages probably in here? I don't know.
These are the 80s books. Yeah. I worked on the late 2000 books.
Got it.
I've got a whole box of them in the other room.
I love that. So I do remember a lot of people quoting the handbooks on like Tom Brevoort's Formspring, being like, well, how can this be that? Because, you said this in the official Marvel handbook. And people, he would just be like, oh, like, it's writers who are piecing together history there for other readers. Did you like how do they know you're the real deal with those characters? Like, do you have, I used to work at Marvel. And so where my question is trying to go is, I was in their custom publishing division back in 2006. So when we were done with something, it went to the copy editors and they sort of fact checked everything. Were in the case of like the Marvel handbook, did you guys get fact checkers, or that's it? What you put in there, no one questioned?
No, we were questioned. So we had, 15 to 20 writers, all of us working on our individual entries. And then we would read through each other's things. And then it would have to pass through the editing team at Marvel at the same time. So it was closely scrutinized. There was no getting errant facts in there. You'd have to be real creative and sneaky to make that happen. There's definitely fact checkers in place.
What's one random, obscure Marvel fact that not many people know?
I have a billion. My favorite thing in any comics is just random characters who are brought back. So like the current run of Iron Man has all of these obscure villains and characters and one-offs in it right now. And it's really fun. So I love it anytime they bring in like a deep dive into continuity. One random Marvel fact that shows up in my brain. It's hard to latch onto one. It'd almost be easier if you gave me a character
Okay. Well, you know who I'm going to ask then. Jean Grey.
Jean Grey has so much randomness. I think something not a lot of people know. She has a sister.
Oh, Sarah, of course.
Who has two children that are also mutants who are dead.
Yeah, they died during the Shi'ar slaying of the Grey family.
Shi'ar Death Commandos, which is the first name for a team. So I'm waiting for them to come back. I think people forget about Joey and Galen.
No, resurrect them. And Sarah, give Sarah, she died with the failings. Give sis, I know she's a human, but like, come on, give sis a good nudge. Although maybe she doesn't have a protocol with the with Cerebro. But okay, how about this? I've spoken to so many people about my disdain for Beast. And I was always like, listen, I can stop if someone just answers one question for me about Beast. And I've asked Jordan D. White, I've asked retailers, I've asked Zeb Wells, I've asked everyone this. Where did he get his PhD from?
I don't know.
See, you are the encyclopedia of the Marvel universe. You literally wrote the book and you don't even know where Beast got his PhD.
That doesn't mean it's not available. It just means it's not in my brain. I've looked everywhere. I mean, I know where he did his undergrad. He grew up in Illinois, and then he just showed up one day randomly at the Avengers and was like, oh, hey, like I'm a geneticist. Like you can call me Dr. Hank McCoy. And it's like, where did you get that from? Nowhere. In the podcast I'm doing now, which I'll talk more about it in a second, but one of the things I'm commenting most frequently on is it's so nice to have fun Beast back.
Yeah,
he's been so like morally awful in the comics for so long now. It's really fun to go back and read 60s Beast before he got so awful.
Well, those questions were going to come about what you've learned about the X-Men, reading them from the early 60s. But talk about your podcast in great detail. Tell me about your co-host. I mean, I've listened to it, so I know. But for the folks who are joining us today, tell us about your approach, what you're doing.
Yeah, so there's a number of X-Men podcasts out there that are amazing. Among them, the one on your shirt, the Ex-Wife podcast. Which
we love Justin and Alicia.
There's so many great podcasts out there. But I was kind of surveying what I was listening to and realizing for a lot of these folks, they'll even talk in their podcasts about we've never read the old original run. Nobody goes back and reads the 60s comics, and so I got this idea of doing like a week-by-week review of the 60s original comics, but from a queer perspective. So we're calling the podcast Graymalkin Lane, which is obviously the street the X-Men live on. And there's a big parallel between mutants and the queer community, largely because you can't choose to be a mutant, just like you can't choose to be gay or trans or bi. And so this idea of just being born with something and then kind of rejected by society, there's a long history of queer people having to leave their homes and families behind to find their own families, their own safe space. So there's a lot of correlation there. So we called the podcast Graymalkin Lane. It's the home the X-Men created away from the places they were rejected, just like queer people do the same. And we're doing week by week reviews of the original 60s books. So starting with number 1 and moving down the line. It's about an hour each week, and we're just laughing our asses off about saucy, ridiculous, awful things. We're doing some kind of character analysis. So for example, we know Iceman is gay now, and we can go back and apply that to the framework of what we're reading in the 60s, when Stan Lee and Jack Kirby did not intend him to be gay at the time. There's a lot of sexism, and there's a lot of bizarre mad science and weird plot twists, and it's just really fun. So we have lots of queer theory, lots of nerd deep continuity dives, and we get to analyze these characters and where they come from a number of different kind of modern perspectives. And we work really hard on the podcast. We do have straight allies who join us sometimes, but having people of color and women and people from all different perspectives so that we can kind of get those fresh voices each week. My co-host is named Heather. She is a pansexual young woman in her early 20s. We are storytelling buddies from a group here locally. And we've had a really fun time just kind of going into this each week. Every podcast we record, we leave with a giant smile. So it's always a good sign that we're having fun. And I'm hoping that's transcending into the recordings.
Oh, it is. I mean, the last episode I listened, you guys were doing Kazar, and it was such a riot. And you guys started talking about like the dinosaurs TV show as well, and not the mama. And I forgot what question you posed to your guests on there, but you said something to the effect of, pick your favorite dinosaur and stuff like that. And is it pronounced Kazar? I forgot. You corrected the way it said. Is it Kazar?
Kesar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always said it.
On the cover of X-Men 10, it says his name, and then right underneath it says, "Here's how to pronounce it." I'm like, oh, here we go. Now I know.
It's very easy there. Do you know Jordan D. White? On Twitter. I don't think he's on Twitter anymore, but he was going back and tweeting about reading X-Men comics since issue 1. Mm-hmm. So, what's one thing you think you've learned about the X-Men other than Beast is fun? Like, okay, sure.
There's so many bizarre plot twists that just make no sense in the context of even. So one of the things I really try hard to do is read it from a 1960s perspective. Mm-hmm. Like, this was marketed for white boys buying comics in gas stations, right? Like that's basically their target market. But then we'll analyze it from a 2021 perspective. At the end of X-Men number 9, Professor X has left the team for months. He's hunting down his arch nemesis, Lucifer. Mm-hmm. You know nothing about Lucifer. You don't learn it until X-Men 20 who he even is. But at the end of X-Men 9, he almost destroys the planet. And then at the end, Professor X says, "Okay, we're going to let him go now." And they're all like, "Okay." You're like, wait, what? Like, you've been hunting him for months and months. You just stopped him from destroying the world. And now you're like, "Okay, bye. See you later." There's so many bizarre little twists that way. Probably the thing that stands out the most rereading from now, because I haven't read these comics in years, Jean Grey is so underutilized in the early books. She lacks personality. She's either jealous or like pining for Scott in her thought bubbles, with so little to do. And Professor X is a huge jerk.
What I'm thinking about with Professor X is the scene that obviously gets called back during Onslaught, where he's here like, "Oh, like I can't help worry about the one I love," in reference to Jean. And
who's his student, his teenage student.
Like, what? Like that? Fuck off, man. Like, Jesus, that's insane. And I don't think that's never been revisited since Onslaught. I think that's it. Jean saw it and it never.
I think you have to forgive him to a certain point. It's just an errant thought, but still, it says some things about his character. I believe it's X-Men 5, if I'm getting my numbers right. The Professor X at the end of X-Men 4, in order to stop the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants who've taken over a country, he throws himself on a device that like stops a nuclear bomb from going off, and he narrowly saves the X-Men, but he loses his powers at the end of the issue, and you're like, oh no. So in X-Men 5, the whole issue, he's an invalid. Jean Grey's carrying him around telekinetically. They're spoon feeding him. Angel's like flying in the air to grab his jacket for him. And he's like, oh, I'm so hurt. They go off and they fight Magneto on asteroid M in space, and they almost die. And when they return home, Professor X is like, by the way, just kidding. I was never sick. I never lost my powers. This was a big test. You passed. And he's like, oh my God, this guy's an asshole. It's really jarring when you go back and read these books.
That's insane. I wanted to go read since issue 1, and I have the Marvel Unlimited app, and I started reading it, but I don't know. I feel like your podcast does a great job at curating that and its madness. One of the things I remember reading, and maybe you can frame it for me, was that originally they really did not want those parallels with otherness, that they were supposed to more be seen as science experiments. And I'm just curious if you see that at all.
They use the word mutant right away, and the mutants in the early books are constantly referring to themselves as Homo superior. This is why we are better than humans. We are Homo superior. I'm not exactly sure when the ethos of like we were born this way comes into it, but I think it's pretty inherent from the beginning. In fact, I think at the beginning, Stan Lee tried to tie a few characters into like their parents were exposed to nuclear radiation or something, and that's why they were born with powers. Like Professor X,
Children of the Atom.
Professor X's dad died while working on the first atom bomb. Like that type of thing. But I think it's right from the beginning, it's very clear that they are the other. I think it's X-Men 5. I think it's the same issue. It's kind of your first big example of anti-mutant prejudice. Magneto sends Toad down to Earth in a disguise, and he's hopping around pretending to be a professional athlete in order to lure the X-Men in, because they're going to think he's a new mutant. When they get there, he rips off his mask and he's like, haha, it's me, Toad. And the whole crowd of people like storms in, like, kill the beast, like from Beauty and the Beast, right? Like they come in with the intent of harming. So you see this like example of prejudice pretty early on. And then the Sentinels are created as early as, I think it's X-Men 14 or 15, where you see the government creating machines to contain mutants. So, I mean, no matter what their intent was, they latched onto that like other theory pretty quickly early on.
Yeah. And do you see why the book eventually got canceled for a couple years? Do you think it's weak among sort of the other books like Fantastic Four and Avengers that were being published around that time? Like, does it just not hold? Is it just like not as good as those other ones?
I don't know that I have an answer. I kind of enjoy it all the way through.
Okay,
I think
like
it struggles. I think it struggles a little bit to reinvent itself. Roy Thomas takes over the book pretty early, and he kind of takes the characters in new directions. But they end up going to college. I mean, so they do go through changes. Havoc and Polaris come into the book. The art gets a lot better.
Popo in the house. Does she have a latte from Coffee?
The art gets a lot better, and you get a lot of new stories. I can't exactly say why it was canceled, actually. I think it was pretty good back then still.
Okay. Yeah.
You get into the early 70s. I almost enjoy it more than those original 60s books. Although those, God, I could go do reviews of Thor or the Avengers or anything in the 60s as well. It's ridiculous. The Avengers fight Baron Zemo once, and his goal is to drop glue all over New York City and glue down people to the pavement.
Yes, I love that.
I mean, there's some amazing shit back then. It's incredible.
Well, one of the big things that happened with the X-Men, that era of X-Men, was all new X-Men. I think they were called Yesterday's X-Men when we saw it on the timeline that the Avengers had, and we saw that Yesterday's X-Men were going to come. Yeah. And that is what we're here also to discuss today. Brian Michael Bendis's first 6 issues of all new X-Men. And I'm curious, you and your podcast, you guys went there with the time displaced X-Men, where they came to the present.
Yeah. So first to comment, retroactive continuity, retcon, we all know what that is. It's modern writers going back and either altering or inserting pieces of history that we didn't know about. So we've had a number of that with the X-Men exploring their early adventures, everything from X-Men First Class to X-Men Hidden Years, and the Hidden Years by John Byrne is so fun. And it's supposed to like fill in the blanks on a lot of these stories. Bendis's work in All New X-Men was really astounding. And I remember enjoying it the first time I read it. Mm-hmm. But since I've been doing the podcast, I reread that whole like 5 years of comic books. And it's really solidly good until it isn't. It goes on way too long.
Yeah, I remember that being, I wish Battle of the Atom probably, and I think Battle of the Atom actually happened pretty early on, but after they started splintering the teams, I was like, anyways, I'm sorry to cut you off.
When they go into space, yeah, there's points, all of the Venom stuff, and it gets uncomfortable.
And Angel's wings and stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, which is a cool concept until they resolve it. We'll talk about that in a minute. So when you're going back and reading the original books, in X-Men 8, there's a scene where Iceman and Beast are out in the public. There's a young boy who's gotten stuck up on a roof and he may fall. I think his name's Jimmy. Beast goes scrambling up the wall to find him and save this little boy. But when he gets back on Earth, the humans are angry. Like, look at this man. He saved this kid, but he's a mutant. We should attack him. And Beast is a teenager and he's rightfully quite upset about this. And he goes back to the team and he quits. He says, I'm done. And that's the moment when, I think it's in 2012, Brian Michael Bendis chooses to bring the team forward to the future. Mm-hmm. The characters are all in a really kind of strange space. Cyclops has just been made the leader of the team. They're all kind of new characters or blank slates still. But Bendis had to draw on these like decades worth of history, everything we know about these characters at this point, and then bring them into this really complicated modern X-Men world that's so fractured and nuanced, and there's so much going on. And frankly, it's a brilliant storytelling concept.
I agree.
How do these teenagers react to their modern selves, frozen at this moment in time and now brought forward? And it's so good, that original run. It came after AVX, right? The Avengers versus the X-Men. Cyclops is in prison, so it's Emma. And, Beast goes back in time and wanting to bring those X-Men to the present to show them what Cyclops has done. And like the mutant genocide, which we know he was lying. I loved it at the time. I thought there was something really powerful about being so young, being so optimistic, and then coming to, the present and seeing that everything you've worked hard for is going to end in your death, in Jean's case, her death. And I thought it made for really good storytelling. I feel like they editorially didn't know what to do with that concept. And we know they couldn't go back in time. Does that ever get answered? That they couldn't go back in time, but then during extermination, they're able to go back in time without any qualm. Was it ever resolved why they couldn't go back? And then they also try to say that they came from an alternate past, but then I know that was later retcon out. So there's a few times they try to go back into the past. There's one point when they physically can't. Mm-hmm. They find themselves unable, and they feel like they've altered themselves enough, or just the timing is wrong, or something. So they determine to figure it out later. There's a time in the future where they're researching it a lot and they're finding they can't go back. At one point they do travel back, but they see a different original team, and they assume like, oh geez, it's like we've changed the whole past, now we're stuck in the present. Yeah. They later retcon that to say that original team that is in the past is the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants from the future. Do you remember that team?
Yeah. I do.
Hayes and Molly Hayes and old Deadpool. And they've gone back to the 60s and they're posing as the original X-Men and thus create a different alternate timeline. So when the X-Men fix all of that, then they have a bunch of crazy shit happen, and then Then they go back to the past because of Manon and Maxime and Teenage Cable and all of that stuff that happened in Extermination.
Well, I remember just being really happy with the book because that was the first time we really did get Jean back in a significant way. Because obviously there had been all of those red herrings with Hope being the Messiah, or Hope being Jean Grey reborn, and Jean being the Messiah baby. And then we just got her silhouette in AVX. So we see her come back again during All New X-Men. And one of the things that I found really curious about these first 6 issues, even when I read it then, I feel like the vibe was that Cyclops had moved on from Jean, that Emma was sort of his love now, that their relationship worked, that at the end of New X-Men, he chose her, even though it was never explicitly stated because she died, but and so they kind of picked up that thread. And then when Cyclops sees Teen Jean, he's here like, the love of my life, everything I've always wanted. And Teen Jean kind of like freaks out and like, throws him off,
Which, by the way, we commented on Professor X's creepy thought bubble about Jean. This is adult Cyclops lusting after like 16-year-old Jean, and that scene reads really creepy now.
Yes, it's
in fact, there's a scene later where they're at the Weapon X bunker, the new Xavier school, and adult Cyclops goes into Teen Jean's room and he sits with her and he's talking. And when he walks out, Kate Pride is like, "You are an adult and she is a teenager and you will never be alone with her again." And you're like,
yes, Kitty, go Kitty. I remember that. That was in Uncanny, was it? When they went into the bunker. The whole way that was managed for Jean, like I feel for her character when people are like, oh, she's so angry, she's so irrational, she's reading minds without permission. One, her powers got kickstarted way before they were supposed to. Two, you literally plucked a 16-year-old girl from her time, brought her to the future, told her she was destined to die, and that all of these people were in love with her. And another line in like the first issue of All New X-Men, Wolverine is like, that mind stuff doesn't work on me, Genie. And then he falls asleep, because it did. I was like, that's such a weird line. This is a teenage girl. Like, leave her alone. Like, everyone's like throwing their baggage at poor Jean. But the biggest sin was Hank McCoy when Jean was in his mind and she puts him in that god awful 60s dress, which I loved at the time, for the era. I love the 60s look. But I don't, and he's here like, that is my favorite Jean Grey costume. Fuck you, Beast. Fuck you.
So Jean, if we're focusing just on Jean, there's 5 characters. Jean gets her whole adult life downloaded into her brain at once. And it's not just that she died. It's that she married the love of her life. But first he married her clone when she was believed dead after being taken over by an alien and destroying a planet. Then Cyclops had a baby with the clone and sent it to the future. And then Jean got all of their memories with her own. Yep. And then she has a daughter from an alternate future. And also some aliens came and wiped out your entire fucking family. So your mom and dad and sister are all dead. Your whole family is dead. And also you're a telepath. Like, that's going to do some traumatic shit. I actually love what Bendis did with her in this run, with her kind of unethically using her powers and then coming around to being more responsible with them. Her desire to like change her future. You want compelling storytelling. I think his work with Jean, she's the star character.
She is.
X-Men.
And she got the most love there with like her return. Like people are like, oh my God, it's Jean. It's really Jean Grey. And I'm forgetting who said it, but you're like, oh, that's Jean Grey. Huh, you X-Men have so many lives. To the point that when adult Jean came back, it was sort of like, hey, Jean, what's up? You know what I mean? So she really is a star. And I think she grew the most out of all of them from a story perspective. Obviously, one of the other big stars was Bobby, who, had a complete, personality shift when they brought him into the present. And he felt more secure with coming to terms with his identity and everything. And do you remember that him coming out was actually leaked before the issue ran? I think someone took a photo of it off the press, and then it sort of made its rounds on the internet.
Yeah, I actually think during Bendis's run on All New X-Men, I think Teenage Iceman got the least amount of love and attention. He was just a jokester. It wasn't until they were in the present or the future for like years, right? It wasn't until like farther on when Jean revealed that Bobby is gay that's when they really started to take his character places. Cena Grace took over the adult Iceman book at the same time, and then Teen Iceman got a boyfriend, so he had a lot more character development toward the end. But in all New X-Men, I feel like he was the least focused on.
We love Cena Grace here. He's been on a couple episodes of the podcast. He's such a good human being. That Iceman run, folks at home, if you haven't already, go read it. Stop what you're doing right now because it's such an amazing series. Both volumes are so great. Yeah,
there's an incredible scene, a different series, but there's an incredible scene of Teen Iceman sitting at the table with his parents, or who are like, "You're so cute, we love you," but he can't ice down because he's so nervous. Meanwhile, they're like all critical and like judgy about adult Iceman. So their son, like in two versions, is sitting at the table, and it's delicious. I love that scene so much.
Well, you know what Cena did so well? He used sci-fi elements to tackle very serious familial issues. And you think like Bobby's parents can't be all that bad if they're looking at their teen son and they want a second chance at raising him right. And being there for him and accepting who he is and saying that he's so cute so they can, move past those past mistakes that they did with the adult Iceman. It was very interesting the way he did that. And I love what he did with the parents in that run, because I think that humanized the parents quite a bit. And Cena's just such a brilliant writer. I disagree about Iceman not getting as much love. The one character I think didn't get a lot of love was Angel. And, here's the thing. I'm still confused what happened with Angel after X-Force and the Death Seed and him being reborn and not having memories and being younger. And then all of a sudden just appearing normal and fine in the Krakoan age. Fine. Sure. Resurrection. Sure. Great. Got that. But like, why didn't like Warren ever have that plot where he was here? Like, I know he mentions it where he's here like, guys, have you not seen me? Like, who is that? But why wasn't there more of a weird focus on like, this guy is literally identical to his teen self and completely mind wiped,
Yeah, so there's a scene where Teen Angel meets that adult Angel in All New X-Men, and adult Angel has been mind wiped, and he's this messianic hippie who's all like peace and love, and Teen Angel gets really fucking freaked out. Like, that is the last thing I want to be. Get me out of here. And he goes back to the mansion determined to return to the past, even if the others won't go.
Yeah.
But Jean stops him telepathically.
Mind controls him.
Nope, you're staying. But then he's the first to go join Cyclops' school after that. So I do feel like Angel got some love, but Bendis treated all of these characters with such regard and affection, and mapping them into the current continuity. It's really brilliant. I mean, you talked about AVX, but we've also had, Decimation, and like there's so much, right up to Cyclops killing Professor X, which is the world that the young X-Men are now coming into. There's so much delicious things to explore with all of that.
I think it's so funny. I think delicious is just such a wonderful word, and I think it did really well. I feel these first 6 issues were, and I know we're talking way past those first 6 issues, but I thought they were so well done. The pacing was so great with, Emma and Cyclops not having control of their powers anymore, and Cyclops sort of having to start at square one, and then him seeing his teen version with the team there, and Emma being like, oh my God, you saw her. You know the difference between an illusion, right? And how it profoundly affected him. I thought it was great storytelling. I wish they would have been able to ride the momentum a little bit more and have more of a direction. And I think that's, unfortunately, when you're publishing comics weekly, you don't always have the gift of foresight or knowing where you want to go. It's easy for us to play Monday morning quarterback like 5-7 years later, however long ago these books were published. But, I wish they would have had a long-term mapping out like we've seen in the Krakoan age.
Have you ever seen a show that you're enjoying and you don't want it to end, but then it goes on too long and you're not enjoying it?
Supernatural.
Breaking Bad would be an example of the opposite of that.
I've
5 seasons, beautiful arc, ends incredibly, and you want more, but it ended at the right time. Yeah. And that's kind of how I feel about All New X-Men. It's the series that went on too long. They're like, we're having fun, so let's put it out a couple more seasons. And then it just got ridiculous. So in the podcast, we talk a lot about this, but one of the big struggles then as fans trying to fit all of this in is in X-Men #8, they go to the future, all this shit happens, and they come back with their memories wiped, and then let's pick up as we go. But there's some really big problems. There's some really big continuity gaps. And maybe the most egregious is Teen Angel in the future passes through the black vortex, loses his feathered wings, and gets big giant fire cosmic wings. If
It hooks up with then X-23.
Yes, hooks up with female Wolverine. Then Teen Cable cuts his fire wings off and grafts on Mimic's wings. So Mimic is the X-Men ally who sprouted his own wings. So when Angel goes back into the past, he's got Mimic's wings on his back. So everything after that is Mimic's wings.
No, you're absolutely right. That happened in Extermination. And I loved Extermination. I thought it was really, really well done. I'm forgetting the name of the twins that they met that allows them.
Manon and Maxime.
That allows them to like lock away the memories of the future and then reopen them, when they become adults, and then they can find out how to stop, I believe it was Ahab. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that this is such a small thing, but again, because I'm a crazy Jean stan, I was like, but Jean's hair, you know what I mean? Like, that's it. She can just go back and like, did they not age at all when but you know what I mean? It's just some of those things that you're like, it's really tough. But
if we can deal with the sliding time scale, we can deal with nonsensical time travel.
Well, it's so interesting. I was going to ask you about the sliding timeline because Jordan was telling us that if, the Marvel universe has been around for maybe like 12, 15 years, that means the Fantastic Four would have gone into space when Obama was becoming president. Mind blowing.
Well, except in another 30 years, it will have been 2025 when they went into space.
Or they went into space during a global pandemic.
Yeah. So I think I actually really hate it when writers try to go back and tell the 60s stories as if they were in the 2000s or something, because like suddenly the X-Men in the 60s have cell phones in the books when they were teens now, and you're like, no, let's just leave that there. Let's not try to over explain.
Was that year one? I think year one, it's the first time I noticed they had like cell phones and stuff.
They tried to go back and add tech. It's kind of bizarre. One of my favorite storylines when they come to the present is Cyclops and his journey. I mean, he is an orphan from an orphanage, lonely, morose, and Professor X is his father. So not only does he come forward and see that he's gone crazy, but that his adult self murdered Professor X. Then he goes on to meet his dad, who's actually alive and off in space. So that Cyclops series with Corsair is one of my favorite things that comes out of the...
I haven't read it in such a... Well, I mean, we have to have you back again so we can talk about it officially, because I haven't revisited that. Like the all new X-Men issues, I always dive back into because I thoroughly enjoyed them. But that series, I never do. And I love when Cyclops meets up with the uncanny Avengers and he sees Havoc and they give each other a high five. But I'm sorry, I'm going to hijack it again. The best scene was when Jean peeks into Wanda's head and starts crying, saying, we were on the verge of thriving and inheriting the earth, and she robbed us of it. So, I'm sorry. Anyways, making it about Jean.
We're bringing the Scarlet Witch back, too. We've been reviewing the Scarlet Witch's first appearances on the podcast, and she, in the 60s, again, enormously underused, always being sexually harassed.
By Mastermind, Toad.
By Magneto, by Mastermind, by Namor, by Toad. Like it's uncomfortable. So I'm always happy when she joins the Avengers shortly after that.
Did you ever see the Floating Hands cartoons from like the early 2000s where they like just did like parodies of the X-Men? And they did a House of M parody about Wanda, and everything that happened there. And Cyclops in it is like, I miss the days when Wanda's powers were more inconvenient. And it's him like being a kid fighting with Wanda. And Wanda's like, ha! And then like he gets an eyelash in his eye instead of like reality being warped. It's, it was definitely a cultural sample of the era and the problematic rendering of female characters.
Wanda in the 60s is either being harassed, being saved, or being protected, and basically does nothing with her powers. Like when she's part of the Brotherhood, I mean, the 60s team loved her because she had a heroic bend to her, much as did Quicksilver. But yeah, she's not treated kindly in the X-Men, and that costume is the worst thing ever. Like the toilet seat face cover, and so yeah.
Shout out to Demanda Martini, who makes it look so beautiful. Makes it look so beautiful because Demanda loves a dumb headpiece.
Demanda and I just commented on this on Instagram today. We had a back and forth about Scarlet Witch's costume. It was it's a lot.
Shocking. This is another episode where we talk about how amazing Demanda Martini is. So there you go. For everyone who always engages with this community, they know how much we love Demanda Martini.
Yeah, she's fantastic. One of the ways in which I really tried to put myself in the context of All New X-Men is I pictured like my 16-year-old self coming to the present and seeing like how my life has turned out and how that would fuck with his brain. And then I go back in the past and I, of course, would want to do a bunch of things differently because that's how human life works. But then you put that into the mutant universe, and obviously it's a very different context with all the sci-fi. What would 16-year-old Dayspring learn?
In today's world, oh man, that's that. If you would have asked me in 2019, I'd be like, the party never stopped. I don't know. I think there was. What would he learn? I think he would be proud. I was a very bashful kid. And the fact that I've been able to make a living off of being an auctioneer and going to galas and, standing in front of a room full of people and sort of burying myself and asking for money, which is one of the hardest things to ever do. I think he would be proud, and I think I would want to instruct and give him that wisdom. But, the last few years have been this last year and a half has been so tough. And, I would always pass on the advice, like, cherish your mom, cherish Victorious, who was Apollo's older brother, a little bit, as much more as you can. I mean, I always have, and I always did, but, it's been a tough year. Sorry, I brought the energy down. We're going to cut that part.
No, it's okay. When you ask yourself that question, like time traveling and talking to my teenage self, like, I think that's going to bring up like a huge well of like, oh shit. Like thinking of what we would think about what was to come, I think there's a lot there, and I think it taps into like a very emotional space very quickly, which is one of the things, again, Bendis does beautifully with this run, is he puts all of that emotion into it.
I think teen Dayspring would just be like, bitch, you're still frosting your tips. Like, but I think
teen version of me was like a closeted Mormon, like good boy. And I think looking forward, I would be very shocked and appalled at like the future out gay me.
Yeah.
But also like really resentful, like, oh man, I want that. But I think teen me would be horrified at my current life. Although he'd be pleased I'm happy, of course.
Of course, but no, I love the energy you put out there. I love seeing your Instagram and all your adventures. I mean, there's a lot to be proud of.
Yeah, thank you. I have carved out a good little life here.
Well, the one character we really haven't spoken that much about and his plot is, of course, Beast. Mm-hmm. And, fuck Beast. You know how I feel about him. I'm still unclear why he was dying in these first 6 issues. I don't think I quite understood that then. And I don't quite understand that now. Why was he just dying randomly?
I think when Bendis, I have not talked to Bendis about this, so I couldn't answer. But I think when Bendis was coming up with this idea of Beast is going to bring these kids to the future, Professor X has just died, decimations happened, Beast has been through all this shit. He hates Cyclops at this point. And by the way, I think Cyclops had Beast tortured during that like dark X-Men run on Utopia. Anyway, like they're not friends.
I don't remember.
But so Beast, I think Bendis needed one more plot device to make Beast desperate enough to actually break the space-time continuum. And I think the way he explained it was, Beast experimented on himself. He gave himself blue fur, and that experiment is now resulting in him dying. Like he can't do anything to fix it. And of course they do fix it. But but I think in issue number 1 of All New X-Men, he needs that like motivation to actually go back.
Yeah, like this is he wants to make things right.
Mm-hmm. And he's obviously in his trauma and like arrogance, because he's he's got narcissism, out the ass. But but I think he's like, I need the world to be different, and so I'm going to break these scientific laws to make it happen.
One thing that I thought Bendis did so well in Battle of the Atom was when they saw the future X-Men come, Jean telepathically reaches out to Beast first because they were starting to have some kind of a romance brewing there before she reached to Cyclops. And I appreciated that because I think it's just sticking with the continuity of the story you're putting out there. But then, when him, Cyclops, and Iceman sort of go on the road and they find the secret wars, Madeline Pryor, and they're in like Miami and everywhere, I was just kind of like, I'm checking out now. You know what I mean? Like, I did not finish, I'm forgetting what it was, that All New X-Men, like Volume 2. I did not finish that run, sadly. I picked up again with them at Extermination, but Beast.
Well, it goes All New X-Men Volumes 1 and 2, and then there's X-Men Blue, Uncanny X-Men. There's a whole Cyclops and Jean Grey solo series.
Well, I love the Jean Grey solo series.
Then you've got the Black Vortex stuff, tied in with Guardians of the Galaxy. Then you have it goes on for quite some time, and the characters go through a lot. So again, we have to presume this all happened to these characters before they went back in time. Cyclops died once and was revived by Christopher Muse. What's his name? Triage. Jean Grey dies twice. Once the Phoenix kills her and revives her, and another she gets atomized by the poisons.
Yeah, and then she's like rebuilt.
And then she rebuilds herself from like spare biological matter. So apparently Jean Grey is capable of assembling a human body and then giving it life. And we just go, okay.
Yes, sure, fine. But one thing that from the Jean Grey series that I still don't understand is why did the Phoenix want to come resurrect Jean then, and why did it need Teen Jean out of the way? I know Teen Jean was, not accepting the Phoenix Force, and that's fine. And then they wanted to go resurrect, adult Jean. But why do you need to have past Jean out of the way? And then discovering she has power there in the White Hot Room, and the Phoenix really can't do anything. So the Phoenix then just brings her back to life. It always kind of confused me in terms of the logic behind it. But
it's a brilliant series, but there's some strange parts. Like the ghost of Jean Grey, the adult haunts Teen Jean for a while.
I would want an entire mini-series of Ghost Jean and Emma. That was brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That was really fun. So I think, the Phoenix Force is a cosmic entity. It's hard to read its motivations. It just really wanted that host body. And so Jean Grey was the ideal. By the way, the Phoenix is in Echo now, who's a Native American woman, which I love. I'm excited to see what Jason Aaron does with her in the Avengers.
So anything else on All New X-Men that you've wanted to comment on?
So many things that I could I think, as a storyteller, so the next episode of Graymalkin that we have coming out is a 3-hour long trial of Charles Xavier.
All right. We love our 3-hour episodes here.
That's a pretty long time for my podcast, but 6 other podcast hosts, including Justin from Ex-Wife, we sit down and we go over all of the sins of Charles Xavier, and we talk about them in depth and just like how much of an asshole is he basically. And at the end of that, plus all the prep work I did, I'm like, okay, now I know who Professor X is. Like, now I have an understanding. When you consider someone like Bendis with this cast of characters who are, decades worth of history, and they all take that much thought, how do their powers work together? Where do their histories fit? And you add time travel into it, it's a really brilliant series. I'm actually really impressed having gone back to reread that. I think it's amazing.
I think it doesn't get the credit it deserves for being so well done. And Bendis was writing Uncanny X-Men and Guardians at the time this was starting off. I don't know how that works for someone's schedule. I mean, I can't even push out one book over a course of like 5 years. So, I hope he has I think he has a great writing ethic. I think that's what people have always said. He has a good work ethic, excuse me. But I agree with you. And now I just remembered his biggest sin was that he had married Mystique.
Yeah, we talk about that a little bit. Charles Xavier is complicated.
So what's I don't want to spoil your episode, but what's the final verdict? on Charles Xavier?
We come to the conclusion that he's mostly an asshole.
Yeah.
But not egregiously so. I'd give him a score of around 70% on the asshole scale.
Okay.
But still pretty unethical in a lot of ways. He's got a complicated history. It was fun though. It was fun to talk about. We'll probably do similar episodes about the Beast and Magneto in the future, like putting them on trial. Let's see what we come up with.
We did that with Beast. We've done that with Madeline Pryor, and we're also going to be doing that with Namor in a couple of weeks. It's fun to do that deep dive into the characters and really get to know them and just absorb them and kind of see the forest for the trees, because I think there is interpretation for these characters. How do you, as a reader, internalize their story? Yeah. But also, like, facts are facts. And Xavier definitely has so many sins. And, in Astonishing X-Men, when they're like, oh, you locked up this sentient being, and his excuse was, my teams needed to be trained. Fuck you, Xavier. Like, I don't know. There's not much wiggle room there in terms of morality. You know what I mean? But again, making it all about Jean. I'm sorry. I wasn't prepared to come today talking about Jean, but there is that scene in Astonishing X-Men where he's holding Danger's head, and Danger's like, your X-Men have no idea the kind of person you really are. And Xavier goes, I'd like to think Jean knew and understood, and then throws her head over his shoulder. So
no, it's really fun. And if you love a fictional universe enough to listen to a podcast for 3 hours about one character, I love it. I love that we get to go to these places with these characters that are so beloved to us. We find something in them to latch onto. They matter to us. So I love that there's this universe of people relating to these characters that I love in the way that I love them. And I'm really looking forward to your Namor trial. That sounds amazing.
So Chad, you are starting from the beginning, from the 60s comics. Are you just going to go all the way through the 70s, the 80s, and then the 90s, and then the 2000s? What's the long-term plan here?
My goal is to wrap it up when the original run of X-Men wrapped up. Okay. Which is 66 issues. So 66 episodes is plenty of time. We're just recording the first appearances of Juggernaut right now. After which we'll do the first 4 issues of the Sentinels after that. So these are classic, incredible characters. It's really fun to go back to their beginnings.
Yeah. I can't wait to see what you all do next. You just have. I just love all of your energy and everything you put out there.
Thank you, Dayspring, and back at you. You've created this wonderful place where nerds and professionals and everyone can kind of meet in the middle, and you have so much enthusiasm in the way you do things. Thank you. I really, really enjoy your work as well, and thanks for your enthusiasm about Graymalkin Lane. We're the little engine that could right now, so it's really fun to have you taking an interest.
So where can folks at home connect with you? Where can they listen to Graymalkin Lane?
Yeah, Graymalkin Lane, Gray. Graymalkin Lane is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Anchor, and a lot of the places you'll find just your regular podcasts. You can find me most easily on Twitter under Graymalkin P for podcast, or on Instagram just under Graymalkin Podcast. And I'm pretty interactive. If you want to chat, shoot me a message sometime.
All right, folks. And as always, I'm the Uncanny Dayspring, signing off.